So if you were following the news at all in the early period of the pandemic lockdown last spring and summer, and let's be honest, what else did you really have to do? All you were probably hearing were dire predictions about the downfall of New York City. And yes, during the pandemic, we did see a pretty steep decline in real estate transactions, especially in the high end of the market in Manhattan, as well as a steep drop in rental rates. A few optimists like me were quick to point out that you should never bet against New York City. Our history is filled with stories of tragic declines followed by spectacular rebounds. 9/11, the Great Recession of 2008, basically all of the 1970s, Pizza Rat. Despite what you're reading in the news, we said, the fundamental attraction of living in New York City has not changed. Now, flash forward to February of 2021, and all of a sudden, all those headlines have flipped. The news outlets have found a new story to run with, and it goes something like this: everybody's coming back. So in this video, I'm going to share some anecdotal information that I've gathered as a real estate agent in New York City, and some actual data, not headlines, that backs it all up. All this to show you why I can say with confidence that the real estate market in New York City is back, baby. Okay, now I've always predicted that the real estate market in New York City would rebound, but it's happening even faster than I thought. So I'm going to tell you what I'm hearing on the street, as well as the data that I'm looking at. But before I do, press that subscribe button right down there. I'm a real estate agent in New York City. I'm putting out new content all the time about my life and the real estate market in NYC. I don't want you to miss anything. Press that subscribe button, press the like button, and if you have a comment or question, feel free to leave it below. Now, when we analyze the New York City real estate market, it's important to understand that we're actually talking about several different markets. There are 5 different boroughs and multiple markets within each borough. The market for multifamilies in Brooklyn can be up, while the market for ultra-luxury condos in Manhattan can be down, and vice versa. These markets do have an effect on each other, but they also move independently based on other outside forces. The biggest fluctuations we saw during the pandemic were at the high end of the market in Manhattan, while lower priced properties in Brooklyn and Queens remained relatively steady. Now that has even started to change, and the info I'm seeing from the latest data suggests a rising tide that will raise all boats. Everyone that I've talked to, from listing agents in Western Queens to agents that are listing co-ops and townhomes in Manhattan, to reading what Roderick Angle says on his Instagram posts, all say that the market in New York City is picking up some serious momentum right now. NYC agents are busy and happy. I'll quote Roderick Angle. He runs one of the top-selling luxury real estate teams in the country, for those of you that don't know. The New York City market is beyond crazy good, all caps. You got that? These are his words. New York City is back, and we've witnessed over $1 billion of signed contracts in the last 4 weeks in the luxury market alone. He's talking about just his team. It's a big team. That's at levels we haven't seen since the last market high of 2015. He goes on to say that for his team, he feels like August 2020 was the bottom of the market, and right now in New York City has returned to a seller's market now. Now, the Olshan Report is a highly regarded weekly newsletter that summarizes all the transactions from the week before in the New York City luxury market. I'll put a link to the newsletter below, but their latest post from February said this: in the last 3 weeks, 104 contracts have been signed in the $4 million above property segment, totaling over $850 million. That's the strongest 3-week performance since a 3-week period in the spring of 2015 that saw also 104 contracts signed for $780 million. So New York City just had its strongest 3-week run in the luxury sector since 2015. That's saying a lot. Okay, so the luxury market is back in Manhattan. What about the rest of the market? Well, let's talk about year-over-year new contracts signed across all segments. For this, I'm going to pull from the Element report. Again, I'll link to it below. We're going to compare data from January of 2021 to January of 2020. During that time period, new contracts for Manhattan co-ops rose 167% year over year, while new listings on the market declined 14% from the year before. New contracts for Manhattan condos rose 50%, while new listings on the market declined 10%. Element tracks all segments of the market, from properties priced under $500K to those listed for over $20 million. Now, the biggest changes came at the high end of the market, but we see similar movements across the board. We see similar trends happening in the boroughs. New contracts for co-ops in Brooklyn increased 156% over that yearly period, while new listings increased slightly. New contracts for condos in Brooklyn increased 113% over that 1 year period. So there's a lot of activity in Brooklyn. People are wanting to sell and they're finding buyers for their properties. The multifamily stats in Brooklyn are my favorite. Contracts for multifamily units, in other words, the whole building, increased a whopping 480% from January of 2020 to January of 2021. I think there's going to be great opportunities in the Brooklyn multifamily market this year as the pandemic recedes and eviction moratoriums are lifted. I've been advising my clients to look for opportunities as small landlords decide to make a change and unload properties that they've been holding onto for years and sometimes generations. So that's a snapshot of where we are in the New York City real estate market at the end of February in 2021. We're already feeling the wind in our sails. Contract volumes are going up across the board and inventory levels are dwindling in most markets. Importantly, days spent on market is going down across almost all sectors. Once the pandemic starts to recede and we approach the traditional spring selling season, I think this thing is going to take off like a rocket. Can anyone say pent-up demand? So if you're a seller who's been holding off because you thought the market was down, now's the time to call your agent and get that property listed. If you're a buyer who thought that COVID discount was going to hang around forever, my advice is to not wait around. Now's the time to jump down off the fence and get that deal done. I hope this helped. Bye.